Hello, everyone. It's Michael Jaco with Unleashing Intuition Secrets, and I'm joined today by Brad Olson. He's an accomplished author, written many books. We're going to talk about one of those books today, and a world traveler. He's been,
Hello, everyone.
pretty much all over the world. So we're gonna have a really good conversation. We had a great conversation last time. We had huge numbers of people that watched that. I think we're going to have another major blowout on this one. So how are you doing today?
Hey, Michael, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on again. We're seeing you all the time because I go up skiing in Tahoe, and we've got some mutual friends now, and it's great to connect with you in person and on YouTube.
Sweet. Yeah. So let's talk about this new book. So it's in its second printing, so it's really blowing out. You want to show it to everybody? There we go. Beyond Esoteric.
There it is.
Escaping Prison Planet.
Escaping Prison Planet.
Nice.
And at some point, I would love to hear your interpretation of what escaping prison planet means. I do that on a lot of my shows now, and I'll tell you the answers are quite divergent.
Interesting. Yeah, I'll definitely share what I believe it is, and we'll run with that. It'd be fun.
Sure. Yeah. So this is the third book in the esoteric series. First one is Modern Esoteric, Future Esoteric, and Beyond Esoteric. I've been working on these three books well over a decade now. And this particular one took me 6 years to get it done, just because I got sidetracked with a bunch of other books. I published Leo Lion-Zagami, who you've had on the show, and some other authors. Plus I did the other books as audio and second editions. So it's not like I wasn't working on it, but I'll tell you, a year ago when COVID hit, that sure gave me the time to buckle down and get this book done, and sit through my distributor. And once you have a release date, that's like a hard deadline. There's no stalling for time anymore. It's got to get done. And I got it done, and it's doing well. And it came out at a very appropriate time during this whole COVID mess. So I did have a lot of information in there about COVID and what's really going on, at least what we think this is all about, because I think it's pretty clear to you and your audience, this isn't about some invisible virus that can't even be isolated, but it's a larger agenda. And to what that is, well, we could discuss it, but I think we know it's not quite really all that it seems.
Yeah, in our last show, we talked a lot about the Operation Paperclip, the Nazis, and how they came over to America. They brought over their MK mind control, MK Ultra, systems. I've seen you talk about that in your book. So they basically took all their labs, all their nasty labs, population control and all that stuff, and brought them over here. And now we're seeing the result of all that.
Yeah, and it's going on ever since then. Yeah, there's a whole chapter about MK Ultra in Beyond Esoteric. The K standing for control. That's the German spelling.
Right.
KONTROLLE. So it should just tell you right there, yeah, these are the paperclip Nazis, and they came over here with this intention of mass conditioning the masses of people, just as they did in Germany. How do you think they got millions of German people to go along with this program, which in hindsight we can see was this fascist agenda? So this is in the first section called The New Fascism or Neo-Fascism. And a good definition, just for your listeners to get a refresher course on what fascism is. When you and I were in school, we would hear that fascism means Mussolini and Hitler took the government and then controlled corporations. Well, the new fascism is now these heads of government are controlled by corporations. And we all know about how much lobbyist money goes into getting elected going along with the program. But where does that money come from? That's coming from up top. And who is up top? We really aren't completely clear on who those controllers are. That's what makes this riddle even more intense to try to peel off the layers. And that's why the first section of neo-fascism takes up a good chunk of the book, about 150 pages or so. So there's a lot to it. And as we've spoken to before, you can't really go against something or someone unless you really know who they are. So know thy enemy. This is right out of Sun Tzu, The Art of War.
Exactly.
To deconstruct exactly who these invisible masters are in an attempt to try to identify what we're up against.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can tell you, like when I was in the SEAL teams, sometimes we would get mission statements about future potential wars that we might fight. Some of those were down in South America. I was involved in the Panama invasion. Things started to slip into, chasing drug lords while I was there at SEAL Team 6. And that didn't sit well with us. So we, as a group, were like, that's enough of that. And we started to see that basically the reason why we came into Panama was because Noriega was not playing a game with the CIA. And it was basically spitting in their face, and they didn't like that. So they used the military a lot of times to punish people to get out of line. So we started to see that. We basically said, that's enough. That's enough of those missions. So that happens in military forces now. And we saw that with Trump basically taking out the head of the SEAL teams, the admiral of the SEAL teams. He basically fired him, and he fired the head of the Defense Department, fired 2 heads of Defense Department. So the guy that's in there now is a very hardcore Special Forces guy, because Special Forces, we don't put up with the bullshit. If they try and use us and direct us in a negative way, we don't play. So that's one thing that I think everybody can take with them. We've seen some of this fascism, industry, corporate control try to worm its way in, and we have pushed back on it.
Have you ever heard of the researcher named Anthony Hilder?
No.
He passed away now, but he was one of the first to really break into knowing about these large think tank groups who basically then control the government, these corporate heads, including in our country, the CFR, the Council on Foreign Relations.
Exactly.
And he's got a great quote, and I do quote him in this book. He said that the CIA is the enforcement arm of the CFR. And it's interesting that you say in the special ops, you guys would sometimes pull back on some of those orders.
Yeah.
But you can see through this this flow chart where those orders are coming from.
Oh yeah.
And they probably know that the U.S. military is the last division in the U.S. that hasn't completely sold out to these guys. So really, I mean, our armed forces, our military is the last bastion before total fascism takes control.
Right.
And we're seeing in that in the underlying mechanisms of what's going on right now in our country.
Yeah.
And let's hope they hold strong and actually come out of this victorious, because I know there's a silent war with quiet weapons going on right now. For those with eyes to see can pick up a lot of this. And I think your insight, Michael, is very valuable in helping people understand what's really going on behind the scenes.
Absolutely. Thank you. So you go into depth about this. So Operation Paperclip brought them over. You talk about in detail the Nazi, the German aspect of, Nazism, fascism. And now you're talking about the American aspect of it. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. And it absolutely comes down to that. In Future Esoteric, I have a chapter called The Fourth Reich in America. Keep in mind, America is also Central and South America, and by extension, I'd even throw Antarctica in there too. A lot of these Nazis escaped right after World War II through what are known the rat lines.
Mm.
There was a great documentary on the History Channel, 3 seasons of dozens of episodes, called Hunting Hitler.
Mm-hmm.
I went to a lot of these places in South America, Michael, bookend my trip to Antarctica a little over 2 years ago. And I'll tell you, walking into some of these towns like La Falda, Argentina, or San Carlos de Bariloche, and I've been to Germany many times, it's like you're walking into a Bavarian village.
Oh, yeah.
It's so similar. So the Americas does also include South America too, and that really holds many keys to really finding out what happened to these top Nazis. Look, the Nuremberg trials, and I do have a picture of the big 19 on the Nuremberg trial, including Hermann Goring. He was about the biggest one that was at that trial, and they basically had him there because he was addicted to morphine, and Hitler didn't like him because he was weak, because he had an addiction. So he was sort of the sacrificial lamb of the top genre of Nazis. All the rest just mysteriously committed suicide or disappeared or just went missing at the end of the war. Well, they went on these rat lines, which was aided by the Red Cross and the Vatican to give them new IDs, new identities, get them transported over, including Martin Bormann, who I profile in this book. He was the money man. He was the number 2 to Hitler at the very end of the war. He was the one responsible for getting out many metric tons of gold. The corporate interests that they also bought up into many other corporations under Project Paperclip, as well as priceless paintings and artifacts, including the Spear of Destiny, whose whereabouts is still unknown. They think it probably went to Antarctica and maybe still remains there. So a lot of this stuff also comes into question here in America. You have Werner von Braun and Hermann Oberich, other Nazi aerospace scientists that's starting up NASA. I mean, these guys should have been in Nuremberg themselves on trial for slave labor and the things they did in Peenemünde as they were raining down rockets on London at the end of the war. But then they get a hero's welcome and they're brought in over here. And in this country, we can really see that it was the Dulles brothers. And lo and behold, Alan Dulles got fired by Kennedy after the Bay of Pigs fiasco. And then he's on the Warren Commission trying to find out who killed Kennedy. I mean, it's just such a conflict of interest when you look at it all. But it does make sense under the lens of these Fourth Reich Nazis reforming themselves and getting into the deepest arms of our government. We mentioned MK Ultra, the scientists, as well as our spy departments. And you have a lieutenant general named Reinhard Gehlen, another guy who should have been on the Nuremberg trials. He is the spy master for Eastern Germany. We want him in our alphabet agencies, starting up the CIA to spy on the Soviets. So all the while, they're fanning the flames of discontent between the Soviet bloc and the NATO bloc. And a lot of that are these Cold War era Nazis that helped create that conflict, that created this arms race and all these nuclear bombs that could blow up the world many times over. So you really have to look behind the veil here, behind the curtain, so to speak, to see who is really creating these machinations of power and why things went the way they did, and including why Kennedy got shot, and also how they have been so hard on Trump, because until Kennedy, none of our U.S. presidents really stood up to this force.
Right.
And a lot of this force is this
We had Ole
fascism that has infected the country.
Yeah, we had Ole Amagard on our show the other night, and he basically outlined probably about 13, maybe 17 shooters that were lined up that day for Kennedy. And that was basically the turning point of their control. So they took it to the next level. They basically advertised in broad daylight in front of the whole world that, hey, we're in charge and we'll take out anyone that gets in our way. And that just went all over the world. All the guys a lot of the guys that were involved in that eventually were suicided, were killed later.
Right.
And some of them were involved in other missions to assassinate other world leaders. So fascinating stuff. I'm going to share the screen real quick. We'll look at your book. So your book, what I love about your books is on the page itself, you've got a lot of information there. I mean, you get the pyramids there.
That's right.
You got the on where was that? Where the craft were in that one temple.
That's in. Yep. The Osirian.
Yeah, I've been there. So yeah, I've seen that
giant megalithic temple in Egypt.
Yeah. So got a lot of interesting stuff in here just on your the book cover itself that speaks volumes. Then of course down in your chapters, the new fascism, the cult and fascism, world control, Vatican Nazis, American Nazis, MK Ultra, Big Brother, and geoengineering. So that's just the first part. So there's a lot we can cover here just in the very first part of that book. Where do you think people can get the most out of that first little part? Because I think people are going to like they already have been. They're going to be buying this thing up like crazy. This is an amazing book.
Oh, thank you very much. And it's doing quite well, as you mentioned, already in its second printing. It's funny, I was on Coast to Coast AM right when the book came out with Richard Serrett, and we didn't even get past the Act of 1871, which is in the very first chapter. He was just fascinated with how America became a corporation in 1871. And how all our names are in capital letters, from our birth certificate to our driver's license. And you are an asset to the corporation. A lot of people have no idea what they've signed up for from the time they're born, since the time their parents sign off on their birth certificate. You became a chattel to this corporation. You are an asset that is bought and traded and sold on the stock market. You can even look it up on Dun and Bradstreet. You could look at how the corporate charter of the US, this Organic Act of 1871, just supplanted our Constitution and just basically took it over. It doesn't mean we can't get rid of this thing and go back to the restored republic. And I know you've spoke about this with some of your guests and on your show, what we need to do, absolutely. And all the presidents since Ulysses S. Grant, who, by the way, was very much an alcoholic and a very corrupt Congress right after the Civil War. The country was broke. We had so much debt from the Civil War that they just sold us down the river. And ever since then, every president has been more like a CEO of a corporation, as well as those members of Congress are more like the board of directors. And I would suspect that on day one, when new senators and congressmen are brought in, they're told this and say, well, of course you can't speak of it. We're just operating here as this new Constitution directs us to. But if we were to get rid of it, remember the way our country was formed, each state was like a small country. And each state had a tremendous amount of rights. That's probably why the governors still hold so much power. And even Texas has it written into their constitution that they could drop out at any time and be their own country. And believe me, there are murmurings in Texas right now to do that, because the federal government has just gotten so bloated, and this territory in DC is not even part of the US. It's just foreign land owned by foreign entities, most especially the Federal Reserve, who we don't even know who's on the board of our own Federal Reserve that can print our money and charge us interest, as well as the Vatican, are huge members of creating this corporation in 1871 and benefiting the whole time. So, and I know you know a lot about Washington, D.C. and the occult symbolism there. The empire, the city of London, which is a 1 square mile area of downtown London where all the international banks are located, as well as the Vatican, which is in the city of Rome and is its own entity. It has its own postage stamps, its own jail, its own police. And so these are the Empire of Three Cities. And this is what has been controlling the world, the Western world, for several hundred years. And as the US was brought in 1871, we were then chartered as the Defense Department, the military arm of this Empire of Three Cities. And then you get the CIA created in the late 1940s, and then they're the dirty work. They're the wet works who can go in and do these covert operations.
Yeah, I think that
as you know, Washington
Patton,
D.C. is hijacked.
the killing of Patton was the one of the first heads, high level heads that the CIA took out. So they had an assassination attempt on him. He didn't die from it. They basically, he was recovering from his wounds. He was probably going to be paralyzed for life, of course, but he was recovering. They put him down in a basement to say he's being disturbed too much by the press, which was bullshit. They basically went down in the basement, and then he went, downhill, and he died soon after that. So these guys do a lot of stuff. I think that basically Patton, who I think is a reincarnation Trump, that he basically knew things about the new CIA, and they had to eliminate him. So that's one of the things that I think from my studies and from my research as well, that was one of the reasons why they took him out, and he's one of their first people they took out. And so as we go forward, we're going to see, I think, those cities be dissolved. I think that all of that, CIA, FBI, I think those organizations are going to be dissolved. We're seeing that they're completely unbelievably corrupt. Of course, there's a few good people in there. They'll be reconstituted, I think, throughout the U.S. So the city of D.C., as we know it, was probably going to go away. That's my thoughts.
Well, it used to be a swamp. It really was. It was a big bird sanctuary. Maybe we turn it back into just a museum district and reclaim some of the land and turn it right back into a swamp. That's great. As we've been talking now over the last couple of weeks and months, sharing information with each other, and that video of the smoke coming out of the White House lawn and all kinds of excavations at the White House and the Capitol, and the fences are still up and the troops are still in place. Something big is going down in DC right now. Oh, and yeah. As you know, Michael, as a special ops guy, you never telegraph your plan as it's in progress. You'll only really talk about it when it's all said and done. And that should be, I believe, in this month, the Ides of March. This is a time of great change. It always has been ever since the time of the Caesars. That's where that term comes from. That's when Julius Caesar was assassinated and the emperors began a new reign. So it's a portent for change in government, change in civilization. And we know from behind the scenes what's going on in DC and in this country, and what happened with the election and so many other things that are just not right. And if our military is true to their oath, and I do believe they are, then they're the last stand that we have, especially in this country. And we know if America goes, the rest of the country will not be able to stand up to this force. So this is a very interesting time to be alive, and as much of an intuitive warrior as we can each be to make sense of these great changes at hand.
Excellent. Well, you're describing everything really well. MK Ultra. So I see MK Ultra being utilized in the mainstream media. What are your thoughts?
All about that. It has been ever since. There are many documents, and as well as in the Council on Foreign Relations, about how they plan to buy up the media corporations. This actually goes back even to J.P. Morgan. He was big on. They identified 8 to 10 news organizations in the late 19th century as having an untold amount of influence. They didn't need to get all the little county newspapers in the farm towns. What they needed was the New York Times, I call it the New York Crimes, the Washington Compost, and all the others, which have just become big megaphones for propaganda. They've since also bought up Reuters and Associated Press.
Wow.
90% of the news gets regurgitated in all the other smaller newspapers. So the media has been known to be this great way to synthesize what the globalists want and how they can get us to think along their lines. And this is really important to know for all your listeners out there. If you're still getting your media from television, you're basically getting the corporate point of view. You're getting the globalist perspective, what they want you to think. We live in a free will world. You can make your own choices. Just as there are choices now, whether you want that Franken jab or anything else to do with your body. And by the way, during the Nuremberg trials, when some of the Nazi doctors were put on trial, it was established in a world court that we all have the right to be informed consent before we do anything. It is like your God-given right to prevent anything like what happened during these medical experiments during the Nazi period, to give everybody the right to have the informed consent to decide what they want to do with their body. And we know how they're trying to trick us in different ways. And if you are watching that mainstream stuff, you're getting a very distorted perspective. So it's part of the MK Ultra. Of course, they also worked on very terrible experiments against people against their own will. So they were going against these Nuremberg crimes, but because they were done in secret, that they were able to get away with it. When I lived in San Francisco, California, I was just blocks away from the Presidio. And in my research, I spoke to Dwayne Dietrich, and he was on radio shows. He had his own show, and he was, as a young man, he was working in the archives of the Presidio, and he has discussed in great detail some of the underground maps there, 3 very deep levels. There are even videos on YouTube of people sneaking in there and going all around in rooms. I did a video on my YouTube channel called The Underground Presidio, in which I recount talking to one of the groundskeepers and asking him if he's ever been down there, and him just saying, oh yeah, I've been down there, and those passages go for miles and miles and miles.
Wow.
They connect to the larger network of deep underground military bases. But how this relates to MK Ultra, in the 1960s, 50s and 60s, they had a flop house in Telegraph Hill near North Beach with one-way mirrors, and they would hire prostitutes just to get guys off the street and promise them sex and get them drunk and get them high. Well, they would try all the different drugs out. And of course, we know in San Francisco in the summer of love, it was just flooded with LSD. And that guy Owsley, who had literally distributed millions of hits of LSD, never got busted. He'd always just have the very best, and they were just handing it out, giving it out. This was all part of this mass psychosis test to see how susceptible people would be on different drugs. And the ones that had the least amount of effect happened to be the psychedelic drugs and marijuana. So that's why they came down so hard on making marijuana illegal, a plant with a seed that can be grown in the ground that the Bible says God gave to us to have all the plants and the seeds for us to use. But this one, not so much, even though hemp has so many other applications.
Oh yeah.
So this MK Ultra goes really deep, and then it also includes people who have been brought in against their will. In San Francisco, they called it being shanghaied, because this goes all the way back to the 19th century. Some new potential gold miner is walking down the street, and he just gets knocked out. Next thing he knows, he's on a boat to Shanghai and having to work on the boat. So it's got a long history of that kind of weird stuff going on. And it didn't surprise me too much that MK Ultra taking place in San Francisco was a very big thing then.
Yeah. So Big Brother coming in, had Mel K on last night in our Optimized Tribe, like you guys were the other day. She talked about how New York, there's a lot of strange, because they're like basically trying to destroy New York. You know, they had all those riots and burnings of buildings, and they're just driving everybody out of there with their craziness. She said she's noticed strange videos equipment going up for monitoring all over the city, and they wanted to turn that, Bill Gates and Cuomo and who's a mayor, de Blasio or whatever. They all want to
de Blasio,
yeah, they want to turn that into a smart city so that they can basically lock everybody down and monitor them and control them. So she's seen that, and that's part of the Big Brother thing you talk about in your book as well. What do you see about all of that?
And they're also doing it in San Francisco, where Gavin Newsom was the mayor. I actually met him once, pretty tall guy, and just said hi to him. I produced a big event in San Francisco called the How Weird Street Fair. But of course, in 2020, we couldn't do it. It's a springtime event. So far this year, we can't do it. So look, it's affecting all of us in different ways. But this whole lockdown into cities, well, this is part of the original Agenda 2020, the Agenda 21 that was rolled out in Rio de Janeiro in 1991 by Bush Sr. Because Trump got in and held a lot of things up, they revised it, called Agenda 2030 now. And this is part of Meet the New Boss, just like the Who song, same as the old boss. These things don't change too much, but it also goes into this chapter I wrote called Meet the New Boss, into basically the Orwellian world we find ourselves living in, and how these plans have actually been leaked, or they're sometimes telegraphed out, this hidden in plain sight. The media does this all the time, telling us what they're going to do. Just like before CV rolled out, they did a big meeting in China talking about what would happen if one of these coronaviruses got loose. Well, lo and behold, a couple months later, it did. So they plan this stuff far long in advance. And it's also multi-generational. It goes through many different people along the lines, because of course, right now, none of the Nazis who fought in World War II are still alive. If they are, they're in their hundreds, but they're certainly not in a position of power. But they build these structures so they can be multi-generational. And when people get into this network, then they're often compromised. The honeypots, as we know, in Epstein Island, and even out here on the West Coast, Michael, Hugh Hefner in the Playboy Mansion was like Epstein Island on the West Coast. And we're going to find out things about Hef that aren't so pretty, including tunnels that led into the Playboy Mansion. So right after he died, somebody had already bought the place, and they just excavated, and they're tearing up all the tunnels, which in the day led to Warren Beatty's house, and Jack Nicholson all lived in that same neighborhood. And they had tunnels that would go right underneath to the Playboy Mansion. So a lot of this stuff is coming out. And I think what you do, Michael, with Intuitive Warrior and seeing on the inside and being able to astral travel and project and see these things is so valuable, because it does give added data points to what researchers like myself have been trying to figure out for a long time. And I use some of this information from the Farsight Institute. I'm sure you've heard of Courtney Brown and some of the good work they've done there.
Right.
Looking into Antarctica too, including one of these sites, which I'm be talking about in my Hidden Anomalies of Antarctica talk at the 5D conference in 2 weeks. showing one of these big craft under the ice, which can be seen in Google Earth if you use a Wayback Machine to 2013. So maybe a good time to tell everybody we'll have tables together and both presenting at the 5D event. That's the website, 5devents.com, weekend after next.
Yep.
And I'm really looking forward to hearing your talk too, Michael. I'll definitely be in the audience for that.
Yeah, we're going to do lots of, tables. I mean, it's like you're talking about, basically where we have a round table type thing. You're going to be part of you're hosting one of those. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Yeah, that's going to be a fantastic event. So yeah, not this weekend, but next weekend. This weekend, you and I are be kind of meeting up in Boulder, and for Gaia, you're doing George Norrie, and I'm doing the Secret Space program, my first one. So that should be a lot of fun.
Awesome. And I'll make sure George Norrie knows about you and having you on his Beyond Belief show, and hopefully coast to coast. You should definitely get on that too. You've got so much to talk about and such a great audience that follows you too.
Oh, great. Yeah, that'd be a lot of fun. So yeah, Big Brother's definitely coming in. I've seen it, in my travels, worked with the CIA for 10 years. And so I thought it was just being done overseas, but then I started to see it, happening here in America. And then it started to accelerate over the last, 4 to 5 years or so. I kind of, ejected out of the CIA. And then I started wandering the wilderness, trying to get my head back together. And then I decided I would come back and share the stuff that, my intuitive abilities and how anybody can tap into it. And then now here we are. So it's a lot of fun. Once you start to open yourself up, because I'm discovering I'm part of a secret space program. And that happens when you awaken. So that's the beauty. That's what we want to, that's why we try and disclose this information so people can go, oh, my mind is being controlled. No more. Now that you're aware of it and you start to see it, you break away from it. But still, they have ways like geoengineering, basically dropping things from the sky. You want to talk a little bit about that too?
Sure. I've been talking about geoengineering or chemtrails for over a decade now. And boy, did I get a lot of ridicule when I'd put this stuff up. I can't even post on Facebook anymore. In fact, right now I'm banned for a week for putting some stuff about the Franken jab up there, and I'm off and I'm done with it. Socialist media is, just same thing you're having here with your channels. It's just a matter of time till all the truth takers you can only just post pictures of yourself. Hey, I'm having dinner, and that's the only thing that's allowed anymore. But the chemtrail agenda, well, this goes back for decades, actually. And I'll post a great video on the comment section after the interview here for people that want to understand how weather manipulation has been going on since the 1950s. The real heavy spraying agenda started in the 90s. And around that time, a document was leaked called Controlling the Weather by 2025. That's only 4 years away. This was an Air Force document. And I know Deborah Tavares has that document in its entirety on her website called stopthecrime.net. So they basically are looking at controlling the weather. And other big superpowers like Russia and especially China have it. I remember during the Summer Olympics in China, in Beijing in the year 2000, they just openly said it. They said, well, we're going to make sure it doesn't rain because we're going to do the certain kind of spraying that prevents rain from coming down. And it does rain there in China in the summer. It's like the Midwest. They get the big storms, but lo and behold, didn't rain one day during the Summer Olympics. So they can make it rain. They can make it dry. They can control hurricanes. Isn't it interesting that last year in 2020 was the most amount of recorded hurricanes in history, going strike, strike, strike into the US? So the reason they can't declare this is people would say, well, what? Well, make the hurricane stop. What are you doing? Well, this goes all the way back, and this is what I was talking to you and Jay about a couple days ago. The Operation Gladio, which were false flag operations in Europe. There's a great documentary you can see that was produced by the BBC. It's amazing they still leave this up. But the reason they were doing it was a strategy of tension. That's why they're hitting all these regions. A freak winter storm below freezing and killing the livestock, and people taking videos and making a snowball and then hitting it with a lighter and it doesn't even melt. It just turns into some black goo kind of thing. And that's what they're doing. They're using their weapons on their own people here in this country. That's why you can't say, oh, if it was Russia or if it was China, let's go after them. Well, when you do it to yourselves, what's Russia or China going to say? Well, go ahead, kill your own people. But there's a bigger agenda to all this. And it's a many, many faceted approach about what the chemtrails are all about. On the one hand, yeah, they're creating cloud cover, and then they're hitting it with HARP. We saw that a couple of days ago up in Tahoe, right on the front end of that storm that came in real cold and dropped a couple inches all across the basin. But the days before, you could see them chemtrailing, and then it turns like the bottom of a sand in the water, just these, I call them frequency clouds, and they just ripple out in these perfect geometric formations. And then, so that's getting hit with these HARP arrays. And the HARP arrays are really part of the geoengineering question, because you can't really understand why are they creating cloud cover. Well, that cloud cover is nucleated with these very tiny particulate matters, including aluminum, barium, strontium. And then that stuff is raining down on our forests. And I love that interview you and Jay did with the Max Egan, who I got a chance to meet a couple summers ago up in Mount Shasta. Really cool, humble, down to earth guy. And he was saying that they did some tests on some of the soil samples, and they found that particulate matter was like what you find in a sparkler on the 4th of July.
Right.
And you see the way our fires here in California are just out of control, because they've been sprayed with this particulate matter that is a fire accelerant. And you have a lot of really weird things happening with our fires here in California. Deborah Tavares has gone up to Paradise, California, where an entire town literally got wiped out. And she went up there with a couple fire chiefs who said they've never seen fire behave in this kind of way, where trees burn from the inside out. So this is more of the directed energy weapons they use to get these fires started.
Microwave.
And then once the trees get going, then the accelerant takes over, and there you have these crazy wildfires we've had for the last few years. But it all comes down to the way the chemtrails have dropped this stuff, fine dust powder all across the land. And when they need to, when they want to, they can just torch up any part of the country they want that's covered with trees. And guess what? This all ties into this Agenda 21 and then Agenda 2030, where they want to get people out of the wildlands. They want to literally make all this areas of the mountains and the deserts free of people, and get them, stack them and pack them in the cities. They're way more controllable once you get them in the cities. Right. And then you can hit them with the 5G and a lot of other things. And that's right when they got you.
Cities, and in the smart cities, there's no escape. They're locked down pretty much. They won't be able to escape. And so you're right. They're trying to drive them in. Now, another thing that, I use consciousness to basically shield us from a lot of that stuff. When I was in Afghanistan in 2004, 2005, they'd had like years and years and years of drought, just like we'd had here in California a few years back. So I can use my consciousness to bring in weather. So I brought in the biggest snowstorm they'd had in 100 years. So they were like, oh, God is helping them. So it's like, yeah, that's right. Because I connect with God and bring it in. And then I went to Yemen. Yemen had, again, all their wells were drying up. I started using my consciousness they had one of the biggest, rainstorms and, heavy downpours that they had in 100 years. Then I came to Lake Tahoe and Lake Tahoe, the lake was drying up and I was like, I'm going to turn around here too. So I brought in one of the biggest snowstorms ever and filled the lake up. And, so consciousness, the way I see the chemtrailing going on, and I imagine my consciousness going above it into 5D. And I imagine the storm coming in over their control in 3 and 4D. And it works almost every time. So anyone that's seen some of this stuff, you can control that. I've worked with groups where we pushed hurricanes that were going to hit Florida. And we pushed them out to sea. They stayed out to sea all the way up the coast and then went out. So, and they were like 100% going to come in and hit Florida. So consciousness does have a way and can have a way of, moving these storms around, calming them, bringing in weather and so forth.
And I'm sure you've heard of Rudolf Steiner. He was working on moving the weather around too, using orgone energy, which is also techniques to change the weather pattern, proven to work. And boy, did they come down hard on him. Mm-hmm. He again, like Royal Raymond Rife and some of these great inventors, Tesla himself, ended up penniless, in prison, just totally suppressed. So anytime you go up against this fascist government, at least in an overt way, I'm sure you didn't really telegraph that to the higher authorities when you were moving weather in Afghanistan. They say, Jaco, stop doing that. We're trying to dry out these guys or whatever.
So I really told anyone, but now I can't. So I'm like, in your face, we're going to stop this stuff now.
And it's really people that are waking up to their power and realize, tend to think we all have this within us, these innate abilities. I describe them as superhuman abilities that probably had them in past lives and different modalities of our existence. But since we're brought up in this Common Core and this educational system that just makes us memorize, rote memory type of thing, if we were all, can you imagine if we were all trained as a young age into telepathy and astral travel and remote viewing and telekinesis, all of these great superhuman abilities, we would be so powerful if we could decalcify the pineal gland and then begin to really see the world for what it really is and use it into our transition into 5D. That's why there's been such a suppression of this kind of information. That's why they do not want the human race to wake up, because once we do, it's so game over for them in what I describe as the age of transparency. There's just no way you can lie anymore because everybody's going to see right through it. We're all going to be able to read each other's auras and we can tell who's telling the truth and who hasn't.
Yeah. So now let's move into the next area, which is the embargo. So not about the lights in the sky. It's about the lies on the ground. History, because it is written by academics, beholden to their sponsors, never ever tells the full truth, let alone how our planet has been acquainted with extraterrestrials for millennia. Woo! The truth embargo. Let's talk about this. This is great. Great stuff.
Well, this is a term that was coined by Stephen Bassett. It's a good friend of mine. He's introduced me at some of my talks. He is the one and only lobbyist in DC that speaks on behalf of disclosure. He describes everything that has been withheld from humanity as the truth embargo. So it does go even further than what has been withheld as far as UFOs and ET contact. But I also include in this section suppressed human abilities. And my talk on Sunday at the 5D event is going to be on the giants in prehistory and these elongated skull giants that
Nice.
have been found all around the world and completely suppressed. But there are museums in South America where you could go in and see the actual elongated skulls. And Michael, they don't have any suture of the head, and they're 30% larger in the back. You know, we could put boards and we can wrap heads and we can do cranial deformation. But what you cannot do is add 30% more brain. That's impossible. So
Right.
these are very human-like entities, but they're not human. And we've had the proof all along that they've been here. In this country, they've been digging them up out of the earthen mounds, most especially in the Midwest where I grew up. We used to go on our summer vacation to Devil's Lake. So everything's inverted. A holy lake is Devil's Lake. And there you have these giant effigy mounds, which I cover in my book, Sacred Places North America. And in some of these excavations, they were finding giants, they were finding warriors in coats of copper armor and stuff down in Spiral Mounds in Oklahoma, and so many other anomalies that when they found them, they just couldn't get rid of the evidence fast enough. And even if it was an official dig, like Beloit College in Wisconsin was doing a dig and they were coming across these giants at Lake Delavan, and then all of a sudden the Smithsonian comes in, like with the FBI, we're in charge here, we'll take over. And they said, well, we're in the middle of this. And so, well, we'll take over. Well, at least you give us some information when you find it. They take all the evidence away. Beloit College calls them later, says, hey, what about that dig? We don't know anything about it. So there's stories of them just taking all this out into the Atlantic Ocean and just dumping it out of sight, out of mind. Don't even want to go that way. And much is the same with the extraterrestrial question, how it has just been obfuscated and hidden in so many ways, because all the while we're backward engineering this stuff. Of course, wait till we start seeing the kind of ships they have. Maybe they can't just tell us right away, because it would say, hey, didn't that take you more than a year or two to build? Well, they've been around for quite a while. And all this will start to come out, as well as a lot of this, the history of the embargo that has allowed this globalist network of controllers to keep this information hidden from the rest of humanity. But like I say in the back of the book, all that has been hidden will be revealed. And it's just a matter of time. In between the three esoteric books, it's almost 1,400 pages of content. There is so much that they have tried to hide from us, Michael, but now it's just coming out in more like the drip, drip, drip of disclosure is pretty much the steady stream. And we're seeing so much now. Even the Pentagon has admitted that they're backward engineering craft, and new videos seem to emerge every week. And the people are, I think, are just like, well, yeah, we knew about this all the time. So we're not holding our breath for the government to be the disclosure agents. We're doing it from the ground up. Disclosure is very much an organic activity, and that's what the embargo really is.
Yeah, good. So my feelings on this is that, we are, dealing with benevolent extraterrestrials, malevolent extraterrestrials have been in charge a long time. They're losing their power. Many of them have been banished from the earth, the very top level of them. And now their minions are running around without good leadership, and they're making a lot of mistakes. That's how they're going to be taken down very easily, and how they are being taken down, as we speak. As we go forward, that's going to be revealed. More and more of them will be taken down. Of course, they still have, I'm sure, a few little tricks up their sleeves we're going to have to deal with, going forward. There'll be a surprise to all of us, including the people that are working against them right now. But, that's to be expected. They have been in control for a long time. They're not going to give it up easily. Just like we're seeing with, Cuomo should have resigned long ago. Should have never have been, the governor to begin with. He's been accused of wrongdoing for a long time, but they cover this stuff up. So we'll see, the dominoes fall in that. But what do you see going forward as far as like the benevolent ETs? How are they going to be involved in the future, you think?
In the second book, Future Esoteric, that's when I get into a lot of the extraterrestrial question, exopolitics, our interaction with these ET groups. And the benevolents are beholden to cosmic law, much was popularized in the original TV series Star Trek, the prime directive that advanced civilizations cannot directly influence developing civilizations such as ours. What they can do is speak with those who are receptive, usually telepathically, if a person has that ability. They can also prevent nuclear wars, as they have demonstrated at some of our own nuclear silos up in the Dakotas, as well as a very infamous video of one of our rockets taking off from Vandenberg Air Force Base and a craft coming up and shooting it with 3 beams of light and then rendering it useless and falling it to the sea. Much to tell our generals and high staff, you will not be allowed to destroy this planet in the folly of war. What is much harder for them to do is stop these individual acts of terror. What humans do to humans ourselves is really up to us. And our awakening is really up to us. However, we do have this malevolent ET force that has been on this planet for quite a while. And you notice how we've always been conditioned to think, oh, look to the skies. There's extraterrestrials that are coming down from craft. And while that is true, it's not the whole picture, because the whole picture is, what about right under our feet? What about inner terrestrials here on Earth? And they are not counted in the prime directive because they are actually born here on Earth. They have rights to be here, as do we. But they are also ultra terrestrials, those that are not confined only to this third dimensional space, that they can phase in and out of our third dimensional reality. But because they have not embraced love and the higher emotional states and are not in service to all, but are in service to themselves, they cannot break through the fourth dimensional level. Because in 5 dimensions and above, it's one of pure love and light. And they don't want to go that way. The reptilians have been given the option on many occasions to ascend as a race, and they just say no. They would rather be the conquerors. They would rather play their little game and enslave certain nations. And we have to know about this, because there's a chapter in Beyond Esoteric called Being Aware of Predatory Species. We often think that we're the top of the food chain here on Earth, but it's not quite the case, because there are others that can pry upon humans, and we're a food source to them and always have been. That's what a lot of these blood rituals, the Aztecs doing, the pulling the beating heart out of the chest, to, I think you can even tie in the adrenochrome harvesting and a lot of the human trafficking of 40,000 people in this country going missing every single year without a trace.
Wow.
A lot of them don't make it out of the underground bases, and some of them actually get trafficked off planet. And this is what we have to stand up and fight for, are all those unheard voices. Because look, Michael, we're all part of the same human race family.
Yeah.
We have to treat each other the same way. And you can only really consider the advancements we've made by the lowest common denominator. The weakest link in our human family is how we're being judged. And if you were one of them up there, one of the benevolents looking down, I mean, this is like the Planet of the Apes down here, what we're doing to each other, the warfare, the environmental degradation, the starving people on this planet. It just has to end, and we have to bring everybody up.
Right. Now, the human trafficking and the border crossings and stuff like that, a lot of people don't understand that one of the major reasons they want that to happen is because those people are disappeared. They're enslaved, sex trafficked, and a lot of them, like you're talking about, are eaten, used for adrenochrome and so forth. So that's another reason why we need to stop that, flood of illegals over the border, because that's what they really want them for, because they make a lot of money off that. DNA trafficking off planet is huge, and that's one of the things that they harvest from us. And a lot of the stuff that we're seeing right now, where, I'm guilty of it too, but I wanted to know, what my DNA, was. But now they have that. They have millions and millions of people from that heritage DNA stuff, where they have our DNA. Of course, most of us, they have most of our DNA now anyway, but they've been harvesting our DNA for, taking it off world and using it off world and so forth. I'm guilty of it too, but I wanted to know what my DNA.
There you go. That's part of the embargo.
Now they have that. They have millions and millions of people from that heritage DNA stuff, where they have our DNA. Of course, most of us, they have most of our DNA now anyway, but they've been harvesting our DNA.
That's you from the past.
The past coming through again. All right. So little glitch there.
Well, that good point, Michael. And this human harvesting, this is definitely part of the big embargo that all that has been hidden will be revealed. And this is probably among the darkest subjects we could talk about. And I think what America find about this, they're going to be mortified by the depravity that these people have had to endure. And one thing on one commonality I've heard from some of those in the secret space program, and I know it's hard for a lot of people to talk about, but I think I'll bring it up when I moderate the panel at 5D, is, did you see that? And I know some of the super soldiers who've come back have said they did, and they just were powerless to try to help. And the people were screaming, please help, get us out of here. And what are you going to do? You're already off planet. And you try to help them, well, then you're going in the cage too. So it's quite a conundrum how we express our humanity and our sympathy for what's going on. But at the same time, look, you cross the line and you can be one of them very quickly. And nobody really knows where you are out there either, is the thing. My good friend David Hatcher Childress on Ancient Aliens quite a bit, we were talking about the secret space program, and he was saying most of the people that they recruit come from the Navy. Mm-hmm. People like you, because they're used to working in confined spaces, especially in submarines, which are about the closest facsimile to some of the craft that are out there. Mm-hmm. And they like you guys because you can hold your breath and you've got incredible endurance. And if they can enhance you, and a lot of the super soldiers don't like that term anymore. They prefer enhanced soldiers, because they have made you guys strong and smart and able to do things, and with huge amounts of endurance, especially the Navy SEALs. I can't wait to see how far you can swim underwater. I bet you're part amphibian with your training. It's amazing.
That's just pretty amazing what I can do. I can get back in it and, go to an incredible level, but at any time I can jump in and, do amazing things. So I believe, in that secret space program, memories are coming through that, like you said, we're not allowed to get involved in Earth anymore, because, we start to see all the, discombobulation. We want to help, but we're not allowed to, because the same thing, people have to evolve here, and we have to let that process work its way out, which is what we're seeing right now. And people are like, well, why doesn't Trump come back? Or why doesn't Jesus come back? Or, whatever. It's like, it's not up to someone to save you. You save yourself. So you have to awaken. As more of us awaken, then we can push this consciousness to the point where we can join the Galactic Federation. And that doesn't mean that's like everything's going to be hunky-dory at that point either. But at least we advance to a new level, and we get to do a lot more things. 5D consciousness is definitely the way to go. So what do you see? Let's look at the next little list here. And we'll wrap it up over the next 20, 30 minutes here. So you have a lot of great things here. Technology leap, brains of the future, cosmic awareness, exotic metals, crystals, one of my favorites, achieving uber mind, which is, like you say, secret space program type stuff, the bioterrain, and Morgellon nanobots, which is not a good subject, but we got to discuss it, even the bad stuff, right?
That's right, Michael. We can't shy away from these subjects. We just got to take it head on sometimes. Yeah, and this is the Uber Mind section. This is the final section, which for the most part is in a positive vein, things that are happening right now. I'm a positive guy. I like to think that we have a human solution for all this. And by exposing some of this darkness is how people can protect themselves. And we're at a place right now where we're in a self-defense mode, from what we're being sprayed upon to what we're told to jab in our skins to the food we eat, and what might be inside our body right now that has never happened before. In the transhumanist agenda, I propose that we're entering into human 2.0. The evolutionary tree that's going to be quite different from the humans that are great grandparents and before that. And now we're eating so much preservatives in our food that our bodies take days longer to decompose because of all the preservatives we've eaten. Just one example of many of how our bodies are being terraformed, whether we know it or not, and whether it's against our will or knowingly so, because we do have the free will to eat and drink and do things, our habits, exercise, and so forth, how we want to preserve ourselves. And I would propose that we're getting assaulted in so many different ways that our grandparents and before didn't. Just for example, all the microwave and frequency energies that have entered into our world. This is uncharted territory. And then look, when 5G rolls out and some of the things that are said to happen with that it can change the cellular structure and make our lungs bleed and make us think that we have something that is really just being sick from the frequencies of 5G. These are untested sciences that are being unleashed on the human race. And it takes an uber mind, seeing above all this, to really protect yourself and do the right things that are going to help you from these assaults. One thing I have is this chi shield, and this protects from all the frequencies, and it's right above the router and for cell phones, and outside all the frequencies outdoors. And this is made by a great company. It's actually manufactured in Germany and called WaveGuard. Anybody that wants to look into it, you can get 10% off using the product code Harmony. And I recommend it. I've been able to sleep better with this, and I've noticed different things that are going on in my life have become a lot more harmonious. And even my health too has improved as a result. So if you don't know it, you're not going to see it. But once you see it, you're going to want to protect yourself from it. And that's kind of the whole encapsulation of Uber Mind. And that's when it goes into crystals, which I know you know a lot about. You have great crystals in your space, as do I. And exotic metals, such as monatomic elements, monatomic gold. You know, when they first got into the king's chamber in Egypt, they found that big sarcophagus in the king's chamber. Really wasn't a king's chamber, and it wasn't a sarcophagus. It's an initiation room. And it's known that with the power of pyramids, that it can affect different things within its field, as our good friend Rob Potter demonstrated with his copper pyramids. You can preserve food longer. Even knives will get sharper inside these pyramids. So take the Great Pyramid, the largest structure from the ancient world, the only one of the 7 wonders of the world that still stands. And when they finally got in there, there was this white residue. Someone from the British Museum had the foresight to collect it. They didn't know what it was, and they just put it away. And many years later, they finally did some tests on it and found out it was the residue that is emitted from the body from using monatomic gold. And monatomic gold is an incredible discovery. This is fairly new, and it can put you into that multi-dimensional state. As I said, the pyramid was an initiation chamber, and you will have, basically coming out of your sweat glands, a little residue that has this monatomic element in it. And this is what the ancient Egyptians really wanted. I would even say that this is what the Anunnaki really wanted on this planet, was to harvest the gold. And then the gold can be converted to this monatomic gold, this mana, this formula that can make you younger, make you more perceptive, and give you these superhuman abilities at a very easy stage. So when you see how it ties into the ancients and how humans could have been DNA manipulated to get us to this point where we were smart enough to take orders, but dumb enough not to question authority and just go work in those gold mines and pull it out for us. And isn't it interesting how we still use the term like Lord for God and landlord and these entities that rule over us, and they are on the cover. Here's one right there in clay, the reptilian-like Anunnaki. And this, by the way, this is a representation of the yellow cube, which is this very high-tech device, this chronovisor that can peer into the future in the series of probabilities, but also can look back on the past with very exact science. Absolutely. Of course, I discuss what the yellow cube is in the book. May not have time to get into it now, but really amazing time to be alive, with incredible technological discoveries, putting everything together from pyramids of the ancients to modern transhumanism of today.
The Vegas event, we got Sam Osmanovic from Bosnia. I've heard him speak before. David Wilcock used to talk a lot about him. He's got amazing work on the pyramids, and he shows that pyramids are all over the world, thousands of them. So we just think of the ones in Egypt, but in Bosnia, there's one that's even larger, way larger. And he's working on that. He's going to be talking about that at the event too, the 5D event. So that's going to be magnificent. So I see you have, the pyramid on your book cover too. So very, very important structure for humankind over many, many thousands of years.
Yeah, Dr. Sam is great. And he had a table next to mine at the UFO MegaCon last February. We became really good friends. And he just said, get yourself to Bosnia. I'll give you the tour for a whole week. I'll take you to the top. And did you know that there are a series of underground passages below the Bosnian pyramid?
Yeah.
And really amazing stuff. Yeah, the power of pyramids, I think it's only really just beginning.
Oh, yeah.
That we're coming to an understanding what they were all about. And they are all around the world.
Yeah, definitely. Brains of the future. What's that chapter about?
Well, Brains of the Future, this is more along the lines of transhumanism, but it also has just about hermeticism, ways that we can transcend our body, even questioning whether or not brains are even essential. Some entities, such as spiders, have very, very tiny brains to their body mass, yet they can spin these very intricate webs and do these incredible things. In this chapter, I profile a person who basically lost their brain, but they could still do certain functions. But then this gets into more things in your realm, such as remote viewing, to lucid dreaming, to psychics versus remote viewers and the Schumann resonance, and how a lot of these things can affect our thinking, but also aid us in our development of these superhuman abilities to do it ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So I just think people have the right to know whether they pursue something like lucid dreaming or not. It's just up to them. At least know what it is and know what it's all about. And that's where I come in with kind of this big picture perspective and giving a whole bunch of subjects in a pretty brief synopsis. I mean, many of these subjects could be entire books in and of themselves, but I like to take the larger view to give people an overview of all the esoteric subjects that there are. And that's what that chapter is all about.
Wow, very good. So achieving the Uber mind, when do you think the Uber mind is there? So, I've kind of experienced some of these things with the remote viewing and influencing. What else do you see in the future for humankind?
Sure. Well, we're talking about even age reversal now using ions, negative ions. Why do you think we feel so good when we're down by crashing surf or by waterfalls? Starting to understand that there's ways to age reverse ourselves. I always found it fascinating that when Billy Meyer, the famous Pleiadian contactee, he was talking to this beautiful supermodel woman named Semjay, who looks like she's in her 30s and could be a runway model. And he finally asked her age, and she was 130 years old, to look that good all the way through. Wow. And then, so this gets into the prospects of the med beds and even the Integratron that George Van Tassel was working on in Landers, California, just outside of Joshua Tree. Incredible structure, but it never came online. He was sabotaged by the Men in Black right before it was to go live, but benevolent ETs were helping him with the design and construction of the Integratron. Mm-hmm. So you can see how there is a concerted effort for humans not to adapt to this new technology in these new ways that would give us such incredible abilities that they couldn't have control over us anymore. Because as you know, Michael, we are very powerful beings.
Yes. We
just don't realize it. And once we do, it's certainly game over for this globalistic cabal. They will not be able to, as Q says, walk the streets safely anymore. It's not that we're going to go after them violently, but it's just game over. And then we can move on to this golden age, this hopefully Nasara and Jasara. And one of the super soldiers, and I know you know him, James Rink, he did a great video series on Nasara, Jasara. And a lot of people in the know feel that this is what's going to take us there as a planet, as all the human race, because then nobody gets left behind. And that's something that I really feel strongly about, that if it's going to be for someone in the human race, it should be for everyone. Just like this yellow cube. If someone's going to be able to have access to it, we should all have access to it.
Yeah.
So
talk a little bit about the yellow cube.
It's the equalization. Okay. All right. Well, so this was demonstrated to generals in 1964 as part of the Greada Treaty. So there's this treaty, I believe it's null and void. It's with the malevolent ETs to exchange technology for them being able to operate here, as well as abduct people and cattle mutilations. I think a lot of that ties into it. So this particular year in 64, it was demonstrated to the generals at Holloman Air Force Base that there was this device that they were going to give us that had the ability, it's in the Looking Glass family of technologies that also include time travel, like Stargates. And they're all similar. They're all tapping into it. Andrew Basiago describes the chronovisor. I think that's another way of viewing the yellow cube. But basically what it can do, and it interacts with each individual. So if you just wanted to see, so for example, your own past lives, what did I do in Egypt? How do I feel such a connection to that place? Mm-hmm. It can take you back there, and you walk through it and you'll get goosebumps on your arm because you'll know that's you. So it's very interpersonal in that way. But then you can also go back and look at any event in history, not only on this planet, but any other planet, with exact clarity. So if this were to be released to the masses, let's say we all had it on our smartphone, talk about the next killer app, then we would just be able to put to bed every single conspiracy that there ever was. We
Yeah.
could freeze frame in Dealey Plaza and see every shooter and how many rounds they got off and where the kill shot came from and everything. And
Wow.
we'd all know it, and we'd all be able to see it and share it with each other.
Mm-hmm.
So if the yellow cube, and that's why I put it on the cover, if this technology were ever given to the rest of us, that's another piece of game over for the cabal, because we would just be able to see and expose every single one of their crimes. And there have been many.
That's really good. I have a connection with that device in the space program. So when I do my regression, doing 2 regressions, 3 hours long, on I believe Friday, Saturday, one of those days. Getting Friday, so Saturday, and then Sunday we do the filming. But yeah, I definitely am going to like look into that particular aspect of it. I talked to Barbara Lamb for about an hour, and she's going to guide me into that area. I believe that has to do with consciousness. If your consciousness isn't at the right level, you can't connect with it, and it won't connect with you. So that's one of the things that we have to look forward to as we raise our consciousness. These things become available to us. The things that we saw on Star Trek, where you just like punched in what you wanted for dinner, and then it just came out. It's the replicator. Basically, what it's doing is just taking energy and focusing it into creating matter. So these things exist, which is amazing. So as we go forward, the amount of energy that we have, and free energy, however that's created, whatever, is going to be the determining factor of how advanced we become. How maybe some cities will be more advanced than others because they have a better energy source. Families will be more evolved, I guess, depending on how much energy they have. So energy can be created, with consciousness. So that's what I believe is happening in that part of the program, where we connect energetically, consciously, with these type of replicators and the cube and stuff like that.
Mm. And they were originally found by scientists that were listening to old records and finding that there are these little remnants in there that, when produced, conversations that were held around the time of the recording would make it in there, and somehow it had a time back. I've got another great YouTube video that I'll put in the comments section about what the chronovisor yellow cube is all about, that helps explain how this technology, look at it more as if we discovered it. I do believe this is backward engineered technology that was given to us, as I said, in 1964. And I do describe the whole context of what those meetings were in the Greada Treaty and so forth, and Beyond Esoteric. But for people to understand and give them basically a layman's overview of how this is actually very real technology, and looking back at the past isn't quite as hard as we once thought. Then when you incorporate the Akashic records, this crystalline record of everything that has occurred, and this being crystal being the ultimate receptacle of storage of information. Edgar Cayce saying that there were 3 halls of records, one below the Great Pyramid, another one below the ocean near Bimini, and the third in a pyramid in Mexico. And in my book, Sacred Places Around the World, I reveal where that third one is. It's called Piedra Negros in Mexico, under a pyramid. Very, very difficult location to get to. But he predicted when all of these would be discovered, including the underwater one. He said in 1968, they would discover evidence for Atlantis in the Caribbean region. And that was the year that scuba divers found the Bimini roads, these giant megalithic perfectly situated slabs. And Mother Nature does not create in perfect 90-degree angles, one after another. It's like
Right.
saying these megalithic walls in Peru were Mother Nature. It's not. It was constructed, and so were these Bimini walls. So we have so much history, and that's part of it. And I do love history, and always have,
So, yeah.
to go into the history that hasn't been told to us or has been edited out, as we were talking about the giants earlier and so many other subjects,
Hmm.
because there you start to get some of the meat and potatoes about the real story of humanity and this long journey we've been on here on this planet.
Interesting. So the bioterrain, what do you see in the future for the bioterrain?
Well, this is a great subject. Again, I think people absolutely need to know all about the inner terrain model. And this was brought out during the period of Louis Pasteur, who is considered the father of germ theory, the father of microbiology. And much of what Pasteur was working on and popularized, because we all know pasteurization, and that's zapping all the bad bacteria and germs and producing milk that way. But something is always lost when you pasteurize. Sometimes that bacteria or even the germs can actually be a good thing. Look,
Hmm.
if germs were so dangerous, the human race would have been wiped out long ago. We live with germs and even viruses on a daily basis. So to understand the inner terrain model, or as it's now more popular known as the bioterrain, it's the whole inner gut. And that's why I have a person with the gut highlighted. And that is one of the keys to our health, is to understand this inner terrain model. And most sicknesses do come from the stomach
Hmm.
and the intestines. So in the time of Louis Pasteur, there were some proponents to his one germ, one cure model, which is then predicated on all the vaccines
Hmm.
and all the allopathic medicine that has followed since. And because those were so profitable, there was an incentive for the Rockefeller Foundation, which, by the way, the byproduct of petroleum goes into many of these pharmaceutical medicines.
Hmm.
And there was a lot of money in it. So this was the path that medicine took about 120 years ago. Look, before then, we were all homeopathic remedies.
Yeah.
And our grandparents, I would argue to say, and our great grandparents lived a much healthier lifestyle than we do now.
Right.
Living on the farm, eating farm fresh foods, no preservatives back then.
Hmm.
And now we have all of this. Of course, it's affecting our bioterrain and it's making us sicker. And as the story goes, one of the speakers at the 5D event is going to be Robert O. Young, and I can't wait to hear him talk. And hopefully, we'll get a chance to hang out and meet with him,
Yeah.
because he's one of the biggest proponents of the bioterrain. And that is, if you have a fish tank that's dirty water, your fish is trying to jump out of there. But if you have a clean tank, the fish are healthy, and you don't have to vaccine them. So Robert O. Young also, I quote in this book, and has popularized the story of Louis Pasteur on his deathbed, recanting the one germ, one cure, and
Mm.
saying it is all about the terrain. And there were other scientists during the time of Louis Pasteur that were so sure of themselves, including one named Claude Bernard. He drank a glass tainted with cholera and did not catch it. So the story here is that you make your body super strong, you eat healthy foods, and you get rid of all the junk inside of us, and you clean out that fish tank, you're not going to need any of these allopathic medicines or any Franken jabs for anything, because you're going to be so darn strong that maybe you could even withstand a glass of cholera and not get it, because your inner terrain be so strong would be able to eradicate all these dangerous viruses that do come in.
Mm.
We are assaulted with them all the time. So, of course, our body is prepared to meet the challenge of extracting them from our body and doing us harm.
Yeah, I mean, that chapter right there is probably worth, the money you pay for the whole book. That's fascinating. Very good stuff. Um, I worked a couple weeks when I was in my teens on uh, a farm where they had milk cows, and I used to like herd them in and hook them up to the milking machine, stuff like that. The one thing I loved about working there is I got all the ice cream that I wanted that was unpasteurized, all the butter that I wanted was
There you
unpasteurized,
go.
and milk. Oh, the milk was just amazingly. Oh, it's like I remember one time I was on Alaska cruise, and we took a helicopter up to top of one of the glaciers that had a stream that was running through it. So like million-year-old, ice melting, and you're drinking it. It's like, oh, it's so pure. But that we can't get unpasteurized milk. They won't allow it. And if someone tries to sell it, they get shut down. So that's, like you're talking about, that's part of the Rockefeller thing where they're trying to control our, bioterrain by, making it not healthy, so that we have to have other things, the bump in the arm and so forth. So the last thing we'll cover is Morgellon nanobots.
And this is what I save for the end, because here's this dark agenda coming down and affecting each and every one of us. I'm doing an interview with Satya Stone and a host the day I fly into Colorado in 2 days. And we're going to do a round table on this, including the red wine test, which is you hold a glass of red wine in your mouth for about 5 minutes, spit it all out, see what comes out. And every time I've done this with people, 36 times, every single one has had it. And it freaks them out.
Wow.
If you clear out the wine, keep the little remnants, these Morgellons, which I propose are in all of us at this point, because it's been raining down in the chemtrails. That's another part of what's going on with the chemies. These nanobots get into the body and they replicate in the stomach again. And then they start moving around. And in some cases, with people who are Rh negative blood factor, like my family, can start having these things coming out through their skin. So the bodies in some people start to try to extract them, where a lot of people, they're just incubating them without even knowing it. But you understand what a nanobot is and what Morgellons is and how to test yourself for it. And once you do, I offer some solutions using, always go to the homeopathic remedies using colloidal silver, which happens to be in the exotic metals chapter, to other very non harmful essential oils and some other treatments that are
Nice.
in the book for just generally better health to support the bioterrain. I'm a very solutions oriented researcher.
Mm-hmm.
It's one thing to say, hey, here's what's going on, but it's another thing to say, here's what to do about it. And that's part of me being of a positive mindset and wanting people to have the information. Just have the information, then you can decide what to do with it.
Yeah.
But I know this has been a big part of my life, and trying to unravel this whole mystery of artificial life, not just artificial intelligence, but artificial life that is now being introduced to the human. And this is collectively part of this anti-human depopulation agenda. And the anti-human part, well, that would suggest that there's someone on high directing this depopulation agenda that just thinks there's way too many of us on the surface, and we'd be a whole lot easier to control if there were only 500 million of us, as is stated on the Georgia Guidestones.
Yeah.
So they want to get rid of 90% of us. Yep. And I think people, again, have a right to know, and they should know and know how to counter it. Because if you don't, you'll be the chattel that they want all of us to be. So it's what they would call the useful idiots, their words, not mine. The people that are going to just jump on board with everything they're told out of the idiot box and get involved in doing what the globalists want them to do, unfortunately, they'll be the first to go. But then it'll be the warriors like us who are going to refuse to go along with the program that are going to be the thorn in their side. So maybe we're exposing ourselves for who we are, Michael, but I think I know you and Jay, your videos, and you guys are saying, hey, we're just going to be strong about this and go forward. And that's just the way it is. And let's see what the future brings, but I'm certainly going to protect myself. And I know you are too.
Yeah. Well, you give a lot of excellent points in your book, because I remember when I was a young Navy SEAL, there was a lot of us that would bitch about things that were wrong. And I remember like one of the master chiefs looked at me and said, Jaco, if you're going to bitch about something, you better have an alternative to make it right. And I was like, whoa, I got to be responsible. So that's kind of the way we all need to be, you know. That really hit home. And I was like, from that point on, I stopped bitching, you know, and started finding solutions. That's what we're doing now. So I like what you said, and you know, the lead into that that chapter, that group of chapters. All frequency emanates from one sacred divine source of consciousness, and that's what I use. I tap into that all the time. We live in an age where we are hypnotized by our own ignorance and controlled by an invisible master. To break free from the false matrix, we must first free our minds. And your information is absolutely helping that process.
That's what I'm here for. This was my mission. It took me 55 years to figure it out, but let the cards fall where they may. I got this done. And you know what, Michael? The last page on the last day of editing, I had kind of an emotional feeling like you did it. Congratulations. You finished through, you followed through. And I didn't know if people would take to this book or would like it or not, but I've been very pleasantly surprised how well it's done out of the gate. And I intend to keep promoting it and appearing in conferences, as well as virtual ones, and doing interviews with great minds like yourself. And through this, we increase the consciousness of everybody else. Because when you and I talk, it's not 1 + 1 = 2. It's 1 + 1 = 10. And then when we add other like minds, that consciousness field just grows. And when we get enough, just over 50%, we could have this proverbial 100th monkey effect. And it could really ignite and wake up the entire human race all at once. Yeah. And if we can be alive to see that and play a small role in facilitating that, boy, I think that's the best karma you could do. And that's in service to others. And as long as we stay true to ourselves and really do feel for the human race, this empathy, this gratitude, stay in the higher fields of love, they can't get us then. That's our shield. That is our protection bubble from them coming at us in some of these very nefarious ways, and protecting ourselves too from the frequencies, which, as you said, it's a double-edged sword. It can be a good thing, and it could also be a very harmful thing. So we have to know the separation. We have to know what we're up against to protect ourselves and to protect others.
Excellent points. And that's a beautiful way to end that, you know, focus on the consciousness and the vibration of love, because it does empower you. It makes you stronger. It makes you break free from the matrix and start to create your own reality, which is what we're doing. Brad, always a pleasure. Look forward to seeing you in a few days in Boulder. And I hope everybody got a lot out of this, and we'll see you guys